Our next work of art from the Orientalizing period is this statue, the Lady of Auxerre. Now, I've put up here the period style, Orientalizing period, and then in parentheses, I've added an additional Daedalic art. I put it here because I don't want you to get confused. Sometimes textbooks will refer to the Lady of Auxerre as Daedalic art. It's not a term I like to use. It's misleading, but I don't want you to get confused. So she's part of the Orientalizing period. And then specifically, historians use the term Daedalic art because of her geometric shapes and rounded forms. If you want to know more, I guess I'll just tell you now. It's called Daedalic art because historians were so impressed with this type of figure and form that they associated it with the master craftsman of ancient Greek mythology. His name was Daedalus. Daedalus was a master craftsman who worked for King Minos, the guy who had the Minotaur locked up beneath his palace. In fact, Daedalus is the guy who made the contraption so that the queen could have sex with the bull to make Minotaur. I know. Daedalus, also a great, inventor of things. He had been captive in the palace with his son Icarus because evil King Minos didn't want them to leave. And so he built, for both of them, he built these sets of wings that actually worked and they could fly, and they were made out of wax. And so they escaped from the palace with their wax wings. However, his young son Icarus, he was all excited. He's a teenager, teenage guys. He went all crazy with his wax wings. He flew too close to the sun and his wax wings melted and he fell into the ocean and died. I know, I'm going off on all these tangents. That is the story of Daedalus. He is a master craftsman, and so historians have called the Lady of Auxerre Daedalic because they were impressed by the craftsmanship of this piece. I hate using the word Daedalic art, but I put it here so that if your textbook mentions it, you don't get confused. Okay. Lady of Auxerre. Auxerre? Auxerre? What? It's French. French? We're in Greece. Why are we talking about a woman with a French last name? It's because she was found in France. France? Miss Cortez, we're looking at ancient Greece. Were they located in France? No. She was made in ancient Greece, and then during the Middle Ages, during a time when French soldiers were traveling through Greece, she was taken. She was taken and brought back almost like a souvenir, a tourist souvenir. Somebody took her from Greece to the city of Auxerre in France, and so she gets this extremely confusing nickname, the Lady of Auxerre. But she's not French. She's not from France. She was from Greece. She was constructed or sculpted during the Orientalizing period. But we don't know where she came from in Greece. And we don't know what her function was. We don't know where she was originally placed, anything like that. In fact, we're uncertain if this is a lady or a statue of a goddess. She could be. There are some things that we can look at and understand and appreciate, even though we don't know where she came from, what she was doing originally. So she's carved out of marble. Marble, you say? Isn't marble crazy expensive? Isn't the head of Inanna crazy expensive? Yes, marble is expensive. Marble in Greece is more easily to come by than in ancient Mesopotamia. So a lot of the art we're going to be looking at is made of marble, but that doesn't make it less important. It's just more prevalent because it's nearby. Many of the Greek islands have veins of marble, and the Lady of Auxerre is carved of marble, and there is indications of pigment or paint on her, so she must have been brightly painted to be much more lifelike. Her skirt she wears has carved into these incised concentric squares. You see them? This must indicate a textile pattern. And then, of course, when she was painted, it would have made a lot more sense looking at her. So she wears some kind of a dress. The dress, look at that. Dress clings to her in such a way that we can see her breasts underneath it. So it's a tight dress. And then you can see the cuff of her dress right there. On top of her dress, draping over her shoulders, she wears a cape, and she has a tightly cinched in waist. Her skirt falls down to her feet, and we see it draping over the tops of her feet. She wears her hair down and loose. The geometric squares here indicating either braids or curls. These could be ringlets. We saw similar ringlets in Apollo, right? And then, yes, half of her face is missing. We know, indicating power. You take away somebody's face to take away their power. So was she a woman of power? Was she a goddess? And then we have to use our imagination and understand that her hair would have been painted a dark black, and her eyes and her eyebrows would have been indicated with colored paint. Her lips, her skin would also have been painted. So she would have been much more lifelike. Here's a definition I want to introduce to you with her. This type of figure we would call a Kori, K-O-R-E, Kori. A Kori is a standing female statue of a maiden presenting an offering to the gods. Kori are always clothed. A Kori is what we believe her to be because she is wearing clothes. She is a young woman, and then this gesture in which her fingers are resting in between her breasts could be a sign of respect or giving or thanks. I like this view of her. So here we are looking at a Kori, and this gesture could be one of giving or thanks. It could also be one of a prayer. Perhaps she was placed in front of a temple as an offering, and here she is in thanks as an offering. Maybe. We do know that young women, if you were a free Greek woman and you were born into your father's house, and around the age of 11 or 12, if you showed no physical deformities and were extremely attractive, which what 12-year-old going through puberty can proclaim that? Very few, right? If you're a girl and about the age of 11 or 12 and of a family of high status, you could be selected to be a maiden to a god or a goddess, basically a priestess. You would be taken from your family's home, the only home you've ever known, and then placed into a temple complex, and then you would be expected to live the rest of your life serving a god or a goddess. This might be an indication of that form of a maiden offering. You are offered to the gods in service, a Kori, perhaps. I say perhaps because we don't know where she was originally located. The side view here shows her to be quite stiff, right? So let's look at this in terms of anatomy and its realistic representation of the physical form. She stands frontal, meaning that she doesn't, if you look at her from the side or from the back, she's not activating the space. She's not giving you anything. She's not turning to the sides There's no twist or movement. She's very frontal. You can best appreciate her from the front. From the sides, we see that her arms are very stiff and straight, and they fall flat down to her legs. There is a better sense of a body than what we saw in the Manticlos Apollo. We have not only the indication of her breasts, but I do really enjoy this turn of her elbow right there to indicate a bicep and a forearm. Yes, the fingertips are extremely long, but her neck has shortened. She is still square, very boxy. The hair doesn't fall in natural folds. Here, where's my view from behind? So yeah, she is very stiff and the proportions are off, but we're seeing some improvements. I emphasize the anatomy and the idea of proportions and these more realistic representations of musculature and the way that hair falls, because as we go through Greek art, we're going to see this rapidly improve and become even more and even more and even more realistic, to the point where it blows your mind that this is an artwork. So we're seeing this movement or advancement in understanding and indicating the body in Greek art. She's still part of the Orientalizing period because, well, she would probably serve as a votive offering. And her stiff figure is very similar to the imagery that we see in ancient Egyptian art. So that is why I use the term Orientalizing with